it's going to work. Just a moment. Great, and we're live. Fantastic. So I'm going to put that down there. So welcome everyone. It's Tuesday, it's 12:30 in a hot and sunny London. Well, not quite as hot as it has been, but it's really, really nice today. Welcome. I'm Christopher Ross, the founder of Convoy Community. So before we start, for the benefit of those watching or listening for the very first time, here's a very brief summary of Convoy. Job searching and starting new businesses are lonely, isolating experiences. Convoy Community makes these better. By adding structure and accountability, you get done what you need to get done, protect your mental well-being, and pick up some new experiences, friends, and perhaps a few stories along the way. Convoys are groups of people on similar journeys, each with their own destination. The job seeker's journey is for those hunting for their next role. We have the Rock Your Role group for anyone starting or getting embedded in a new role or being promoted, and the entrepreneur's journey for those germinating and early stage incubating new business ideas. Convoy rolled out in July 2020, and since then has helped over 570 people on their career journeys. During the pandemic, 55% of our job seekers found new roles in just 2 to 3 months, which is a fantastic testament to their resilience and the support that you have all given each other. To join, go to convoycommunity.com/register and we can get you connected. So as we always say, do take this opportunity to share your LinkedIn addresses in the chat. It's always good to keep growing your network. And with that all said, we can get started. So I'm in the unusual position again today of introducing myself, which, as I've said, is not my favorite subject, but I am Christopher Ross. I'm a technologist, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm a creative. I've dedicated the last 3 years to helping people on their job hunting and entrepreneurial journeys, setting up the Convoy Community back in July of 2020. I'm an infrastructure and operations IT director by trade, with broad industry experience across multiple sectors. I've led large teams, including at BlackBerry, remember them, in their glory days, which gave me a deep interest in developing people rather than software. I'm no programmer, and the only thing I can develop is a cold. I'm currently a volunteer mentor for the UK Government Help to Grow programme, a mentor for the University of Westminster, and I've been coaching and mentoring for over 15 years. I'm also a civilian instructor for the RAF Air Cadets. Currently, I'm studying for the ILM Level 7 Executive Coaching and Mentoring Certificate. So if anyone here is interested in being a case study, I do need a handful. Please get in touch by email or LinkedIn direct message, as I may have room for 1 or 2 more people for my case studies. So enough about me. I think it's time to dive in. And first, I'm just going to share what some of you will have seen this already. I'm just going to share the 45-second trailer that we did for this session. I've seen this already. I'm just going to share the 45-second trailer we did for this session. I've seen this already. I'm just going to share the 45-second trailer we did for this session. I've seen this already. I'm just going to share the 45-second trailer we did for this session. I've seen this already. I'm just going to share the 45
Yes, and
Yes,
I think has stopped.
it has stopped. Good. Okay. I need to get rid of that one, make sure we're good. Right, so can you see the screen? Yeah, getting a nod there. That's great. All right, I know where to look now. Cool, fantastic. So, want some? Yes, what are we talking about here? Well, we are in fact talking about, as some of you will have no doubt guessed, or one or two of you know, this is about sleep. And those two sleeping beauties are my two beagles, Bagel and Bella, or as I sometimes call them, Beagle 1 and Beagle 2. And if you're a space and science fan, you'll know you may know the origin of that. So what we're presenting here, what I'm presenting here, is based all based on the research of Dr. Matthew Walker, and it's contained in his book Why We Sleep. There's a book, there's an audio book. He often appears on podcasts and on radio and television. He's currently director of Sleep and Neuroimaging Lab at University of California, Berkeley. Originally from Liverpool, he studied neuroscience at the University of Nottingham, got a PhD in London, and became a professor of psychiatry at the Harvard Medical School. Now, he's done decades of research into the effects of sleep, and most particularly sleep deprivation, on disease, on mental and physical health, cognition, and I do urge you, it's well worth reading the book or listening to the audiobook. There are some pretty shocking discoveries that we'll be touching on just a few of, and some other themes in the book, but really I do urge you sincerely to read the book. You'll excuse me, you'll never look at sleep, and particularly sleep deprivation, in quite the same way again. So we're going to talk about why and when we sleep, quantity and quality, the costs when sleep isn't good, a bit about our cave dwelling history. We're going to touch briefly on caffeine, and take a stock look at sleep deprivation itself and what happens, particularly when you mix it with alcohol. I also only yesterday picked up an additional piece of data on which I'm going to share at the end of this presentation as well, which was a bit of a eye opener, bit of a shock. We'll go into that as well. So let's start with why we sleep. So either yell it out or drop it in the chat, or I don't know, send it to me telepathically or something. Why do we sleep? What will you offer me?
To heal.
To heal? Yep. Yep. For physical repair.
And restoration, to restore
Yep.
all our cells and everything.
Yes, yes. So it's repair of cells, storage of memories. Yeah. Okay. We sorted out the trailer, didn't we?
Learning as well.
Say that again.
It helps us with learning. When we sleep, the brain then archives the things we learned during the day.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, consolidation of learning. Dark outside.
To switch off.
To switch off, yeah. Robin puts in here to flush out the horrible drug in your brain that builds up during the day that is now believed to cause dementia. Yes, that's absolutely right. We're going to go into that. When you're tired, yeah, all of those things. So, what have I got here? Healing and repair the body, transferring memories from short to long term, synaptic pruning, particularly the case in childhood, but that goes on all the way through life. Neurochemical renewal. We might say taking out the trash. That resonates with what Robin was saying, to rejuvenate. Yeah, integrating our learning. That's another one. All living creatures sleep. There are arguments some people might like to have about microscopic organisms, but it's a little bit beyond our scope here. But it appears that even those go through cycles which might be described, believe it or not, as sleep. What about the when? Now, the when seems obvious at night, right? And we'll come back to that later. But you might also say that we sleep when we're tired. So we used to do that in ancient times, particularly. Young children, actually, most of all, if not all creatures, sleep just when tired. They just keel over. I mean, you see that with babies. When they're tired, they're out, or they get grouchy and then they go to sleep. But it seems that in our so-called evolved state, there is an element in the human condition to think that it's somehow impressive or that sort of thing to keep pushing through. It does have, though, a very significant cost, perhaps the ultimate cost, as we'll see. Now, everyone here will be familiar with the idea of circadian rhythms, that the body and mind operate in roughly a 24-hour cycle. Actually, it turns out to be 24 hours and 15 minutes. That was an experiment done in a darkened cave. And we move in and out of various states of physical and mental alertness. There are several mechanisms that interoperate to set and manage our internal clocks. The build-up of melatonin is one, which is why melatonin is often used to treat some sleep disorders and to treat jet lag, which you might think of as a sleep disorder as well. Modern society and modern living has really disrupted our natural rhythms. Industrialization was the primary cause because it needed clocking in and clocking out for the sake of efficiency. In the agrarian age, if you like, we worked with nature, we worked in sympathy, we worked and slept in sympathy with the seasons and with the cycle of day and night. But what of, owls and larks? We're not all wired the same way. You particularly see that with teenagers. They seem to, it's a universally acknowledged really that teenagers start to sleep later, go to sleep later and get up later. Why would that be? Why would it be that teenagers brains seem to work so much better that way, or naturally work that way, when the rest of us are getting up at different times? Some of it's habit, but some of it also seems to be related to, one of the theories is it's related to a movement of teenagers to independence. So it's part of that growing up cycle that evolution has brought into being, if you like. So you can blame evolution for why teenagers can't get up in the morning. So the industrialization of work resulted in this more rigid work slot, or you have to be up by a certain time because you have to be at work at a certain time because you're working on a production line, so you had to be there or the production line can't function. But from the research, it suggests that the efficiency of people, particularly for people who are not in their cycle, can go down to about 40% on average of what it could be if they were working at their optimum times. Worth knowing, particularly in large companies. And it's good that, I suppose, in some ways, that remote working has made it a little more possible for people to work within cycles that work for them, particularly if they don't have to do a commute for 2 hours into Canary Wharf or something. So does it make economic sense, really? And maybe in manufacturing, you've got certain requirements, but maybe that's something one could deal with more in terms of how you recruit or how you build shifts. We'll come back to shifts. So when you don't get enough sleep or good enough sleep, what is life like? Can I have some audience input here? So what's it like when you don't get enough sleep?
Stressful.
Stressful, yeah. Tetchy, awful, zombie, I like that. Can't concentrate. Yeah, absolutely. Irritable. Yeah, we can get crabby, confused, prone to colds and illnesses, because it really does seem to, when you don't have enough sleep or enough quality sleep, your immune system seems to get depressed. You can get buildup of excess weight, get cognitive decline, forgetfulness, increased mistakes. I've got a story from a chap when we had our first child, there was only one at the start. The antenatal group, one of the guys in the antenatal group that I was part of at that time, was a trader in the financial markets. Their first child was very, very difficult, and he was really badly sleep deprived, and of course he was making decisions about trades, and he went the wrong side of the trade and cost his company millions. Who knows what cost his reputation? So if we think that the quality and quantity of sleep and chronic sleep deprivation is impairing capability, how much more efficient or more profitable could businesses be if they worked with people's cycles rather than just within, oh, you must be physically in the office between 9 and 5 or whatever. Can't imagine it did his bonus any good. Anyway, so how much sleep do we need? Now, Matthew Walker's conclusions from his research and others are pretty firm on this. It's 8 hours, or to put it in their way, 7.5 to 8.5 hours of sleep opportunity. So sleeping 6 hours a night, only 6 hours, so not that much off, one might say, for just 2 or 3 nights, has a measurable negative impact, which is cumulative. So no, I'm not saying if you went, it was three nights of 6 hours over a period of 3 weeks. No, we're talking about 2 or 3 consecutive nights has this really measurable negative impact. Do it for too long, and that's for most people, not everyone, but for most people. Do that for too long, the damage might be irreversible. So let's talk about caves costs and caffeine. Now, ancient humans lived in caves. So during the day, they experienced natural light, and there are photoreceptors in the eyes. I think it's 1% of the optic nerve is actually dedicated to these, as it were, non-visual receptors. Now, these respond to the natural daylight, to the full spectrum light that you get from the sun, or full spectrum to humans. Is it mantis shrimps can see another whole bunch of bandwidths, I think. Anyway, that's a digression. So at night, caves were lit by firelight, so the light was very dim, and the body's rhythms responded to, amongst other things, the change in light spectrum and intensity, spectrum being really important. Daylight, depending on cloud and where you are in terms of latitude and time of the season, varies between 10 to 20,000 lumens. Firelight, say in a cave or just out in the open, but firelight has something like 600 to 800 lumens. So that's 95% less. So it's easy to see that amount of difference between day and night, it's going to have effects, isn't it? And it's kind of interesting that to some extent we've reversed these cues. We often work in office caves during the day where the light is dim, and at night we've got brightly lit homes. So it's no wonder that our sleep patterns become disrupted, and with all the multiple issues that can cause. Now you might think, where in the brain does this recognition happen of light? Well, there's those of you who know a bit of physiology might know that the nerves from the eyeballs go to the opposite sides of the brain, and they cross sort of in the middle of the brain. And there's an organ, they call it, that sits just above this crossing, called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And that's the organ that seems to recognize the changes in the intensity of the light. And they've seen this on functional NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance, in the lab, so they can actually see the activation of this component in the brain. So where else do we see this light effect being played out in real life? We see it with seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, sometimes called winter depression. It's very, very common in the Nordics, and very much the further north you go, the more you get these long nights and very short days. And in the North Nordics, you get almost no sun. You get midnight sun in the summer, and no sun at all in midwinter. So it's very successfully treated, of course, with light therapy, which is a box that simulates natural daylight and thus triggers the brain. So it's got full spectrum light, all the wavelengths. The cost to business and society of poor sleep is calculated into the billions. But that cost can include life itself in some circumstances, as we'll see. So what about caffeine? Is it okay or safe to self-medicate? He says, checking, we'll see if you've got any coffee left. Is coffee one of the first things that I reach for when I wake up? Absolutely, yes. What time do you call this? Joking apart, caffeine is a drug. It's not the wonder drug we're talking about. The wonder drug we're talking about is actually sleep itself. But be under no illusions. Use it, but use it with great care. And if you want to improve the quality of your sleep, maybe consider a personal caffeine-free zone from, I don't know, midday, 1 o'clock, something like that. Biochemically speaking, caffeine blocks the brain's ability to detect one of the brain chemicals, which is called adenosine. It's a natural chemical neurotransmitter thingy that builds up in the brain during the course of the day, and it's cleared during the night. And it's part of the cycle that creates this, what they call sleep pressure. So that's one of them. Melatonin's another. The natural shift of that. Light is the third component. And these all work together. So you can suppress the brain's ability to sense adenosine by blocking it with caffeine. And that's why you feel more alert, because the presence of adenosine is gently pressuring the sleep to say, hey, hey, you guys, it's sleep time. As you can imagine, if the brain can't detect these markers of the natural cycle, things can start to break down. So now I'd like to take here a particular piece of the research they did, which is documented in some detail in the book. And it relates to a study that they did on the effects of sleep deprivation on drivers. So Walker was comparing the impact of 4 hours of sleep a night for just one night with inebriation at the legal limit. What's that, 80 milligrams per litre or something of blood volume. The results are, and I'm going to warn you ahead of time, trigger warning, it's pretty shocking. So he took 4 groups. One got 8 hours of sleep. One got only 4 hours of sleep. Third group were given alcohol to just that legal limit. And the fourth group were sleep deprived and mildly inebriated. So what happened? They were tested for what's called off-road deviations driving. You'd be pleased to know this was done on a driving simulator, not on the road. So yeah, no hedgehogs were harmed in the making of that research. So first group, group 1, had full sleep, had few to no deviations. The second group, the sleep-deprived group, was 6 times more likely to have an off-road deviation. The third group, that's at the legal alcohol limit, were also 6 times more likely to have an off-road deviation. And then the fourth group, which had both the sleep deprivation and the alcohol, were 30 times more likely to go off-road. So you can see it was compounding the effect, having both. Now, so that's really kind of makes you think, doesn't it? Because people often have a drink in the evening. They've been up all day. If they've been sleep deprived anyway, then through work or something like that, or it's a Friday night when most people go for a drink. All of these things are coming today. It's no real together, so it's no real surprise that the time in the week when you see the most road traffic accidents are on a Friday night, statistically speaking. So what's really important here is there's a very important difference between the impact that alcohol has on driving and the effect that sleep deprivation has. So with alcohol, it slows down your reactions. You take longer to perceive things and longer to respond to them, longer to process them as well. When you're sleep deprived, what you what happens are these things known as microsleeps. It's where the brain just kind of momentarily switches off, or your awareness switches off and then comes back on again. Now, if you're driving in that state, then what you have is there was nobody there. there was nobody in control of the vehicle during that microsleep. And when you come back to awareness, you've got to recalibrate. You're looking back at the road, back at the instruments. What's happened? Where have I been for the last transient moment? And it could be very short, but if you're driving at speed, you know, the scene is changing very fast. So that in the alcohol state, you are present but slow. In the sleep deprived state, there's just nobody there. So it's incredibly risky to be driving when sleep deprived. Yet, of course, most of the investment in road safety goes into things like alcohol. There's very little out there about driving when tired, although you see the occasional notice over the motorway, don't you? So the risks of a catastrophic accident are obviously so much higher, and particularly when you combine the two. So this is not a justification for driving under the influence of alcohol or anything else, obviously. But think about parties, late nights. It's a dangerous mix, and it's food or drink for thought. Food for thought. And while we're talking about food, one of the major contributors to poor sleep is sleep apnea. You know, where you just stop breathing at night, and that really deeply affects the quality of sleep. And this is not meant in any way to be a criticism of anybody for any reason, but in the US, 80% of truck drivers who are driving for a living, they're on the road, they're driving all the time, are categorized as overweight, and 50% of those as obese. Now, they're so much more likely to be suffering from sleep apnea, from that sleep condition, and they're driving for a living. You know, is it an awareness thing? Is it a behavioral thing? You know, it's challenging. So many jobs that people do out there are considered to be, well, it's just a job, but in fact, there are very real effects on those people themselves and the people around them when you have this interruption of sleep. Think about shift workers. If you're constantly changing the shift that you're on, if you're on some kind of shift rotation and you do 3 days, 3 nights, 3 days off or something like that, 3 days isn't long enough for most people to restabilize your clock. So you're constantly jet lagged. I used to look after teams of shift workers, and there was always this question of how can you optimize a shift rotation to make it work. But I don't think, you know, 15 years ago people were paying enough attention to the effects of sleep deprivation in this way. So I think probably, and I don't have the research for this, but I suspect that if you need to have shifts covered 24/7, either try and construct it so you can cover those shifts around the world. We've got connectivity around the world that generally works pretty well. Cover it on a country-to-country basis so that as you go from one time zone to another, you hand over, and then it follows the sun. That's what that model's known as. And then that will give you the coverage without the impact on human health and the collateral damage that can result from that. So yeah, it's super important. So this is the really worrying thing about sleep deprivation, and it was alluded to earlier. So chronic sleep deprivation may be the leading cause of the physical changes to brain structure that lead to Alzheimer's and dementia. Walker's research found that during sleep, there are certain cells that lie alongside brain cells, but after 6 hours of sleep, they shrink. And that allows the cerebrospinal fluid to wash through the brain and bathes the brain cells, cleaning away, washing away the chemical byproducts of brain activity. So that's the breakdown of neurotransmitters, the breakdown of sugars used in respiration, you know, powering the brain. If you think, you know, you create energy, there's residue afterwards, isn't there? When you whether you're generating energy using nuclear power or coal or gas or through combustion, through the combustion of sugars essentially in the brain, in the body, then that leaves residue which has to be cleaned away. If you like, yeah. So if you're sleeping less than 6 or 6.5 hours sleep a night, your brain never gets to that stage. It doesn't get the opportunity for that nightly brainwashing to take place. Brainwashing can be good, especially if you choose the wash cycle. And so that waste isn't being removed, it's building up. And it seems that that could be a major cause of the formation of myeloid and amyloid plaque, which is most often observed in dementia and Alzheimer's patients. So it's, if you're thinking about protecting the quality of your life into older age and your cognition on a day-to-day basis, it's the quality and quantity of sleep is super important. Anyone who's had children knows what it was like when sleep was really poor for several years or decades, depending how long it took to get through all those stages of kids not sleeping through the night and needing our support, and how fuzzy your brain gets. Clumsiness of thought and both physically and mentally is common there. So yeah. So this is the thing I found yesterday. I was looking up what the mortality rate was. Now, it was a bit bizarre. Glastonbury, it wasn't yesterday, it was the day before, it was the weekend. Because there was a report of someone who died at Glastonbury, and there was something like 200,000 people there. And I thought, well, is that about what you would expect for, a 1 or 2 week festival, and you've got 200,000 people? Well, that's a large sample of population. Okay, they're mostly in the middle ranges of age, but how many deaths would you expect in that time? It turns out, on average, you'd expect something like 2. So they were actually on about on target. But I found this graph quite by accident, and it's current. This, as you can see, it's April 2023. Now there's 2 traces here. One is the 5-year average, and the other part you can see there's COVID is included here. So that's for 1 month, April, compared to the average over the last 5 years. And what you notice there that the top, the 2 listed at the top, dementia and heart disease, dementia, Alzheimer's and heart disease, are responsible for the majority. Between the two of those 2 accounts for almost all the rest in terms of volume for causes of death. Now that's, we'd all hope, I think, to die simply of old age, really. Heart disease is very much down to lifestyle, isn't it, and things like that. And dementia, Alzheimer's disease, it seems from all this research that we could do so much for ourselves on that simply by improving the quality and quantity of our sleep. So I'll go back to my notes here. Chronic sleep deprivation may be the leading cause of the physical changes to brain structure that lead to Alzheimer's and dementia. So really super important about that. But there's no easy way to put this. Dementia and Alzheimer's, along with heart disease, being the leading causes of death in the UK. So do you think sleeping better is a hard or an easy habit to improve? And think about how motivated you are personally to sort of take this sort of thing on for yourself, for the people that you manage, for the people you work with, things like that. It's too important to ignore, if you'll forgive me for saying that. Lifestyle habits can be very hard to break, and our sleep habits are part of our lifestyle habits. But I think it's about motivation, isn't it? So I'm going to sum up a bit, and then we can dive into a more sort of general discussion, and we'll hang the slides up. So be friends with sleep. That's not my beagle, but it could easily be. Be friends with sleep. Be nice to your body, and most particularly be nice to your brain. Poor sleep habits have poor outcomes. It affects memory, affects repair and recovery, microsleeps being absent, reduced rationality, emotional regulation suffer, mental disorders of all kinds, particularly, as we said, dementia, physical disorders, including diabetes and obesity. Something that people sometimes notice when they don't sleep enough is they gain weight. And when they do sleep enough, the weight just falls off and they haven't done anything else. They just slept enough. There's another really interesting moment of research in the book about the effectiveness of vaccinations. So they were actually, because of COVID, they were able to explore the effectiveness, because you can assay the effectiveness of a vaccination, and they were able to see the how effective the vaccine was 1 year later, and compare it. Well, obviously compare it, and they had information when the vaccine was done from a study group of how well they'd slept the night before, and it turned out that those whose sleep had been really badly, that they hadn't slept well the night before, maybe they were worried about needles, who knows, but the effect of on the vaccine was still there a year later. So you sort of think that, well, I'll catch up my sleep at the weekends and things like that, but it doesn't seem to work like that. At the time the vaccine was introduced to the body, the body's immune system was compromised because of lack of sleep. So it hadn't, as it were, regenerated overnight. So worth thinking about if we had systems within healthcare that you were able to say, actually, well, last night I didn't sleep very well. Can we postpone the vaccine to the following day, or to another slot? Then it could be the case that that would improve the effectiveness of vaccinations. Interesting stuff, right? Needs more research. So lack of sleep has been observed to disrupt DNA. Of course, that may be a contributory cause in certain cancers, because that can result from the disruption to DNA. So again, worth taking all these ideas on board. So what do you need to do? Get 7.5 to 8.5 hours of sleep opportunity every night, if you can. And when you can't, make sure that you limit the occasions where you don't get that to an absolute minimum. Keep regular sleeping times. The more regular they are, the more your body and brain will settle into those patterns. So if you are a night owl and you don't go to sleep till midnight or 1 in the morning, well, okay, but still make sure you get that 7.5 to 8.5 hours of sleep opportunity. Robin, I think, put in the chat earlier that cycle between sort of 11 and midnight, 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. where the physical regeneration takes place. That's thought to be that's a fairly well researched point, and it's why people will sometimes experience that second wind idea. So you've been working hard all day, and you start to feel really tired around 10, but you push on through and you get to 11 and your energy comes back up. That's because your body's bringing this extra energy on stream to do the repair work. So if you then use that instead for doing whatever you're doing, rather than resting and sleeping and letting your body do its job, then it will impact the repair cycle, it will impact the regeneration, as we said, of your immune system and so on. So regular sleeping times. Keep your bedroom cooler if you can. 18 degrees is, for most people, around about ideal. That's the research, but there will be some variations, of course. Avoid caffeine after midday if you can, and remember, it's not only coffee that contains caffeine. Avoid alcohol before bedtime. I some years ago started wearing a tracker, a fitness tracker, really because I just wanted to monitor the quality of my sleep, because I felt it was bad, and it really helped to have that information coming in. It helped me to have data so that I had something to measure my improvement against, or to monitor it. What you don't monitor, you can't manage, can you, as they say. So it helps. It's not necessarily 100% accurate on everything. Its respiration rates are completely wrong, but the heart rate is clear, and it has some algorithms in it that sort of look at your sleep quality. And I noticed that if I had a couple of drinks with dinner or something like that, or more if it was a party or something, that my sleep that night was just so erratic. Now I wouldn't have woken up in the morning thinking that I'd had a erratic night. I would have been out cold perhaps, but by measuring the regularity of your heart rate, it can monitor the quality of your rest, even if you're comatose for other reasons. So it's really interesting to see that, and when you see it for yourself, well, that was pretty convincing. So I reduced my alcohol intake. Wasn't that high anyway, but we all say that, don't we? But I rarely drink more than once a week now. I mean, maybe the answer of avoiding alcohol before bedtime is to drink at lunchtime instead, or perhaps not. We talked a little bit about light spectrums. Blue light is known to affect your sleep more. Daylight, strong daylight, contains a lot more of the blue frequencies. Firelight contains more of the red frequencies, the other end of the spectrum. And the brain is coded for that. So when it sees the blue light, it's changing your signals in the body. It's waking you up or trying to wake you up. So if you can, use the settings on your electronic devices to eliminate the blueness of light. Avoid the really white daylight lights, or if you can, the LEDs these days are enormous spectrum range, and quite some of them are even you can remote control them into different, not just intensities, but different color temperatures. So that's blue lights. Also, if you can, if your bedroom is really dark, that helps because you're simulating the cave. So if your curtain, if you need them, consider things like additional blinds or blackout blinds or blackout linings on curtains to give your sleep area to make it as dark as possible, because that will help to improve the quality of sleep, especially during the summer when the evenings are bright and the mornings seem to start very early. So love your sleep. Yes, and what now? So are your sleep habits healthy? What are your takeaways from this brief exploration of sleep and sleep quality? And what are you personally going to do to make sure that, what are you going to take on doing? Maybe drop something in the chat if you'd like to say what it is you're going to do. And think about how will you make sure you do it. We talk in Convoy about accountability a lot. So one of the most powerful ways of making sure you get done what you want to get done is by being accountable to someone else, preferably not yourself or your partner or someone you know too well who's gonna let you off. So buddy up with someone who you trust, who has maybe something that they also want to have some accountability around, to work on sleep habits. Maybe work on sleep habits together, but not physically. You know what I mean? You could start by just writing it in the chat, as I say. So that concludes what I wanted to share on the screen. If you would like to contact me, there's some details on there, so that will be visible on the recordings and things. I am happy to talk about this to groups of people. If there are groups that want to hear more about it, I can do this presentation for them as well. Recently started well, I say recently, it was Christmas. It's not so recent now anymore, is it? Called a podcast called Biz and Coffee with IO. And we are looking for some more sponsors. So if anyone knows anyone who would like to sponsor a fledgling podcast, we will even do ads for you. And you can find us on all the common pod grabbers, pod platforms of choice, or at bizandcoffee.buzzsprout.com. So let's stop this and share right there and have a look in the chat here. So what have we got? Robin says, I was going to say that blue light behind your knees might reset your circadian rhythm, but checked if that is bogus. Thank you for doing the due diligence, Robin. That's cool. Jenny's going to change her blue light. Yes, you'll find that there's settings on most phones and in Windows, and I imagine on iOS as well, for Macs, to shift the light frequencies on your screens. Mine do it. I have mine set to go off at to take the blue light down at 9 o'clock at night. So it also acts as a reminder for me on the computer that about time I got off my arse and went and did something more useful. And on the phone, mine at my bedtime I set at 11:45, and my phone goes to black and white at that point, so it shows no color at all. So it's very convincing. You know, it's not like setting an alarm which you just cancel the alarm and say no. Okay, so Shrikant, I'll prioritize sleep and its timings, but hard to maintain during the weekends like Friday or Saturday to go out and have some social stuff. Yeah, that's true. It's got to work for you in as many ways as possible. Claire says, reassuring me that fiercely guarding my sleep is not being lazy. Absolutely. I think, you know, I think people do need to realize you have the right to protect your sleep, and it's so important for mental well-being that it's absolutely Robin. Okay. Do timings depend on age? That's an interesting question, because you often find that you come across elderly people who will sleep less at night, for example, right? That part of that could be because they if they're not busy during the day, then they'll take naps. You know, they'll have lunch and have a nap, have dinner, have a nap, and then by the time they get to night, they're not quite asleep, so it takes them longer to get to sleep, and then their bladder wakes them up during the night. So I think there's what's the optimum? I don't know for how you change your rhythms like that. I don't know how you necessarily do that yet. I do notice that quite often you'll see people who just habitually they'll have dinner, they'll have maybe a cup of tea or something before bed. They go and have a mug of Horlicks or something, and they take a glass of water with them because they're going to down half a dozen tablets because they're on medication for this, that, and the other. And I'm not sure those things support the quality of sleep so well. So I think it's really important to, you know, if people are on lots of medications and that sort of thing, consider the effect that has on sleep and the lifestyle around it that will have on sleep. What else have we got here? Yeah. Let's come down to the bottom. Just have a nap on your friends while you're out. Or sleep over. Yeah. Pen and paper by the bed helps to note things you need to remember rather than keeping you awake. That's brilliant. Yes, Claire, thank you for that. One of the things that keeps people awake is things going around their head. You know, thoughts basically chasing around your head. And the best way of that has been found so far about dealing with that is to get them out of your head, get them on paper. Your brain sees them on paper, so I don't have to worry about keeping that keep alive, keeping that thought alive. I can let it go because it's written down. Really, really good advice. People often journal as a practice before going to bed to just get stuff out of their head, and generally report that when they do, they sleep better because their brain isn't awake worrying about stuff. Yep, you hear about that. Any other thoughts, comments, contributions? Do unmute yourselves and join in. Jenny.
Yeah, I found it very interesting, but I just wonder, I do wake up in the night, but I go back to sleep normally quite quickly. So I think that's okay, you know,
Yes.
if you don't
Yeah.
sort of your head doesn't start going, whatever.
Yes, also,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, a momentary break in sleep in that period isn't going to wreck the whole process.
Yeah.
They did do experiments on on memory. I didn't go into that in very much detail. Memory and learning, where by monitoring, because in the sleep lab they can monitor the brainwave cycles, so they could see when people were going into REM sleep and non-REM sleep, and they would interrupt the cycle either to prevent one or the other, or wake them up at certain times and ask them a few questions and let them go back to sleep, so they could just get a sampling of what was going on. Really, really interesting. And what they found was, for memory consolidation, that not getting all of the cycles of sleep massively impacted memory consolidation. So if you only had a short amount of sleep, the sleep cycle's roughly 90 minutes, as it goes through different cycles, but the proportion of deep to shallow, or REM and non-REM sleep during each 90-minute cycle is different. It's not, half of one and half of the other, or one third. It changes. The spread changes in each cycle. So it's not implies it's not quite the same thing happening each time. They even did this experiment with animals as well. They've done it on humans using a functional MRI and the sleep monitoring, and they've done it with animals as well to break animals out of their sleep cycles at those points, and they could do that with learning. So they could see, well, we've trained this animal to do something today, let's see how it performs tomorrow. And when they interrupted it, the performance was poor. And it was the same. We've seen the same thing in humans, of course, because they've done it on humans, because you get more feedback, and you get consent as well, which is very important. So we've all had that experience, I think, where you sleep on it. You've been working at learning something. It might be a musical instrument, it might be your golf swing, it could be anything, or a problem you're trying to solve, and you just say, well, I'm done, I can't do anymore, I'll sleep on it. And in the morning when you wake up, somehow you've got further on with this problem, or whatever it was you were trying to do the night before. I experienced this with singing, that, oh, it seems to have slotted into place. And it seems that the brain is really good at it stores all these experiences you have during the day, and then overnight your subconscious unravels the ones that don't work, dumps them in the trash, and keeps the bits that the experience was, oh, that worked better than that did, so we'll keep that bit and we'll prune that off. And it's moving then things into the story. Really, really interesting. So it doesn't make sense to cram all night. It makes sense to cram up to a certain point and then sleep on it. Let the brain do its thing, come back to it the next day. So do plan your cramming, a week in advance. And for physical things as well, you can make more progress faster with less stress and less effort by doing as much as you can up to a certain point, sleeping on it. It doesn't mean you're doing it all late at night. You might do it in the morning, but that process of going through a sleep cycle consolidates learning in this very successful and almost cheating kind of way.
Something I've learned over the years when I've struggled to sleep well is, and a lot of people experience this, you've got something important to do the day on the next day. You know how important it is to get a good night's sleep. You wake up 2 hours after going to bed, think, I need to go to sleep, I need to go to sleep. You can't go to sleep, you watch the clock. Another good thing is not to have a clock by your bed, not to be able to see the time, because every time you look at the time, you're thinking, oh, that's 10 minutes less than it was 10 minutes ago, etc. But I discovered something that helped, especially if I was worried about something, and that is that deep relaxation can be almost as beneficial as sleep. So even if you can't sleep, if you can listen to a guided meditation, focus on your breathing,
Yes.
all these kind of things can slow the body down and sort of replicate sleep. And so you might not feel quite so rubbish the next day if you haven't slept well.
Yes, they talk about that. I think that's one of the reasons they call it sleep opportunity rather than actual sleep. That's 7.5 to 8.5 hours of sleep opportunity. And that doesn't mean lying in bed with your phone in front of your face. But you could be listening to an audiobook. You could You don't necessarily want to be reading one because perhaps that's going to mean the light's on and that's stimulating the photoreceptors in the eyes again.
Mhm.
So
Yes, I must
think-
admit, I go to sleep listening to an audiobook every night, but it will be one that I've heard before, because if it's one that I want to listen to, then I'm staying awake to listen to it. So if it's one that I've maybe heard in my waking hours when I'm driving or something, I then don't mind if I miss the last little bit, because you can put it on a timer and it just turns itself off. So.
yes, yes, and you'll have drifted off beforehand. Yeah.
That used to annoy me because I used to use audiobooks as well, and I'd fall asleep quite quickly, and it would annoy me the next night when I'm sleepy that I'd spend about a quarter of an hour trying to find where I actually got up to before I fell asleep. So I was wide awake again.
There's an opportunity for an invention there, isn't it, of one that can monitor your patterns, so it knows you're asleep and bookmarks your podcast, rolls it back 5 to 10 minutes so that when you pick it up the following day, you're not having to search for it. And your brain doesn't have to worry about it anymore, so it's not going to keep you awake.
Did they have anything in there about white noise, brown noise, and all that sort of stuff as which one's better? 'Cause I do similar.
Yeah.
So I use Big Bang Theory to nurse me to sleep. So I've listened to that so many times that it doesn't really matter.
I think there was something on white noise. I think it was one of the things they used to sort of help push other sounds into the background. But I think the brain, the audio part of the brain is the first thing to wake up and the last thing to kind of go to sleep. In fact, some suggest that it never goes to sleep. It is part of your sentinel that watches over you when you sleep, because it's the sound of a cracking twig or something, or a snarling beast that is going to wake you up. But you become normalized to the sounds that you have around you. It's why very often if you're sleeping somewhere else, no matter how comfortable it is, you often won't sleep incredibly well. So if let's say your home environment's great, but you go and sleep in this wonderful hotel spa with the most amazing bed, and you think, wow, I'm going to have the best night's sleep ever, and you don't, because it's unfamiliar surroundings and your brain is on alert because it's thinking, this is a threat, that creak in the corridor, or that the ticking from the air conditioning, or whatever it might be, it changes your alertness, and that will affect the quality of your sleep. Now, 2 or 3 nights in, you'll probably be great. It'll be amazing. The first night might not be, and that could be why. This holidays is the same. You're in a different place, you're in a different unfamiliar surrounding. I sometimes go and stay at my mum's because I'm taking her to medical appointments and things, and it's taken several weeks before my brain has become used to that occasional sleeping over there. It's now I'm used to it again. I used to sleep, 30 years ago I slept there, but 30 plus. But my brain needed to recalibrate for that. It's an interesting thing.
That sentinel thing's quite interesting actually, because when I'm working at client sites, or whatever, I can normally get on the tube and I can fall asleep and I can wake up just by where we are on the track. So I've not encountered that before, but yes, I can wake up exactly on the right platform.
Yes, you've calibrated for it. And I concur with that. I used to sleep on the train wherever I could. It was like an opportunity to get another 40 wings. If you could get a seat. Commuting is an evil thing. Do you think we should wrap up at this point? We've hit our 60 minutes. So let me run through that, and then we can switch the recordings off. So hopefully you had registered for the session, so you'll get the recording. If you haven't, I'm going to drop the link once more into the meeting chat here, just so that it's there and you can save. When you save the meeting chat, you'll have it handy. If you've enjoyed the session and found it useful and feel it's worthy, I'd love a recommendation on LinkedIn. That would be very helpful. My LinkedIn is also in the chat. All you need to do, go to the profile, and you can do this for anyone you've appreciated working with in the past, go to their profile, click on more, then click on recommendation. We have our survey, and if you would be so kind as to complete our survey, that helps us improve, helps us do the things that people would like to hear about. Next week we have Charles McLaughlin. Oh, it says event ended. Don't worry, Sarah, we'll make sure you get it anyway. Next week we have Charles McLaughlin back for part 7 in Making Your Future Work series. This one is going to be on maximizing your learning and development. So do register for that if you can come, will come, or would like the recording. So all of those apply. And lastly, please do follow Convoy in all of our presences in the various platforms. If you'd like to see as we live stream this to YouTube, it is in Convoy's YouTube live stream feed as well. So I think that's in there. Yes, it is. Do remember to save the chat before you go. Click on the 3 little dots at the bottom of the chat window and click Save Chat. If you're not on a computer, that might be different, but hopefully that will be it. And that's it. So thank you all very much indeed for joining and being part of the discussion. I hope you found it useful and will take something away and apply it for yourself.